Welcome to the Los Alamos Historical Society Lecture Series. My name is Heather McClanahan. I'm the Executive Director of the Historical Society. Tonight's lecture is, our lecture series, as I think most of you know, is sponsored by Nicole Kleber and Rafi Abdonian, who could not be with us tonight. Rafi is accepting an award from New York Life in Florida this evening, so we can all be proud of that accomplishment for him. But it's also sponsored tonight by the New Mexico Humanities Council, and we're really pleased to partner with them to bring us Dr. Ned Omalia. Dr. Omalia earned his PhD in Asian religions from Temple University. He has widely traveled the world studying religions, and his favorite spiritual space is northern New Mexico. He is also a chef, a New Mexico Fair food judge, which we got to learn a little bit about at dinner tonight. He is a travel writer, a photographer, and a tour director. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ned Omalia.
Thank you, Heather. I told Heather a story before. I gave a lecture at Western University in Silver City. I gave a lecture. I had a little dinner. We had a lecture. We had a little reception afterwards. I was very happy. I go home. A couple weeks later, I get my evaluation from my sponsor, which was the Honors College at Western. And I opened it up and said, "Dr. Omalia talks too much." So, I have a large clock next to me. Okay, I'm looking at it. I will speak for 59 minutes. Then I will stop. And at that time, you can ask questions. And even after the questions, I will stick around for a long time. So, my study is Asian religions, and I came to New Mexico, and I was teaching I had taught on the East Coast for a long time, and I was teaching in the classroom. Well, I don't like to teach in the classroom. I don't think anybody likes it. Well, if you're teaching chemistry, you probably have to. So I started to find that in northern New Mexico, there were places. I knew about one or two, but then after a while, I started to look around, and I found enough places that I developed a once-a-year seminar, traveling seminar. So 15 students, a couple of vans, sleeping bags. We'd go into the north. We would sleep in spiritual commune. We'd sleep at the mosque I'm going to show you. We'd sleep at a Curandero's house. We'd sleep at Ghost Ranch. We slept at the empty lot of the Carmelite Nunnery in Santa Fe. A lot of places. And so some of these pictures will have students in because I just keep developing that concept. But knowing time's a factor, I'm starting with, in the north, I have two centers, like the roots of the spirituality of northern New Mexico. Lama Foundation is a spiritual commune. It's 19 miles north of Taos. It has just entered its 51st year incorporated. There was a couple years before where they slept under trees, they were naked, they were running around, they were praying to all the gods, but they got incorporated. And so it's 51 years, and for 51 years, someone has taken out the garbage, someone's bought the propane, someone's chopped the wood. The first seminar they ever had was Robert Bly, Iron Man. They now have 8, 9, 10 seminars a summer. They live there through the winter. They live at 8,400 feet. It's cold. So the Lama Foundation, this is the main dome. This is what it looks like up from above. That dome was built by psychology major hippies in 1965, and it's still there. Of course, they use the engineering services of a Denver firm. The Denver firm cut all the wood, but it was installed by those young hippies. So there's the garden. The bell in the foreground came from the Los Alamos salvage yard, and it signals lunch, dinner, sleeping, prayers, things like that. In the middle, it's a meditation room. Lama is eclectic. It does not have a major teacher. All religions are welcome. During the summer, there could be 4 or 5 different religions and spiritual traditions. But you meet in the morning in the meditation chamber, which is a bit like a kiva. This is the kitchen. The kitchen is old. And so as people historically know that when it becomes old, you get a letter saying, we're having a fundraiser. We're going to remodel the old building. But the kitchen was the prominent building in Lama. Lama started with, I'm looking around. As you walk around the land in Lama, you find these little tiny altars. But part of the story of northern New Mexico, the mystery, the intrigue, the drama that happens, Lama Foundation was founded by two people, Stephen and Barbara Durkee. They had a yellow school bus. They had a daughter named Dakota. They lived in Baltimore. They were going to drive to Oregon in 1964 because everyone wanted to live in Oregon and be on a commune. Why would you want to go to college? Except they both had gone to college. I warn you, you want your children to be accountants? Send them to community college. You want them to start foundations? Send them to Stanford. So these Stanford kids were looking for a place to go. They had heard about the scene in Taos, and I'll look at that in a little while. The scene, John Nichols in Nirvana Blues talks about 10,000 hippies this summer coming through Taos. There was the free newspaper, the free clinic, the free clothes store, the free food store. So Stephen and Barbara hear about this, and they drive here. It is so chaotic in downtown Taos that they drive into a dirt road and up a hill. They park for the night. They get up in the morning. They do one of those. And Stephen said, no, this is it. So they stayed there. Other people have come and stayed there. So this is Samuel L. Lewis, born 1896. His mother was a Rothschild, connected with the banking, not with the wine. His father was the vice president of Levi Strauss. He was a precocious child, and his parents refused to send him to college because he seemed to have no direction. He had 1,000 directions. I think that's good. Here he is now. Well, he's not now. This is before he passed away. So he had practiced many different religions. He came to Lama Foundation. He was a foxy character. Many people believe that he is the model of Mr. Natural from those old comic books that you read, you hid under your pillows from your parents. He loved Lama. He said, can I live here? They said, no, you can't live here. We don't want to have a teacher. We don't want to be known as this kind of commune. We don't want to be a Hindu commune. We don't want to be a Buddhist commune. So he quickly, while they were wallowing in their own guilt of saying no, said, can I be buried here? They said, yeah. So he's being buried there. So being built on the site, this is called the Darg, and it's usually the memorial for a Sufi. Sufi could be a part of a Muslim school. When the Darg is done, it will be a little over $1.1 million, which is a lot because the Lama's yearly foundation's budget is around $150,000. But Lama has not paid for it. This may change the face of Lama because this will be, given who Samuel Lewis, Sufi Sam, was, this will become a major pilgrimage site, even in the world. It may change it a bit. It's a beautiful place. It overlooks the valley. I'm wondering if Lama will not change so much that it may not recognize itself in a number of years when the pilgrims come. This is not a sacred spot, but when I take students, I always stop at the descansos because they are, if this lecture was a recipe, these would be the spices. It's a place where you stop, you contemplate, you think about the people who have lavished love and prayers and worship on places where people were injured or killed. Some are spectacular. There's another one. I let my students think about it for a while. I don't dwell on it because it's not a site per se. And what I like is in the course of 2 weeks to visit places while there's an activity. When the Hindu temple is chanting. When the mosque is having Friday afternoon prayers. I don't want to go to museums because when they're empty, they're museums. So here is Dar al-Islam. It's near Abiquiu. It was founded by a couple who had converted to Islam, Americans who had converted to Islam, and then went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, when they were still having tourists. You can't go there now. I don't care who you are. You have to You have to get married to go there. And while they were there, remember this is the short version, Karima, the wife of the spouse of the couple, fell into conversation with some young ladies who turned out to be Saudi princesses. The Saudi family is around 50,000 people, but they have enough money to go around. It's okay. So they looked at her and said, "Why are you here?" I mean, it wasn't, I said it too aggressively. "Why are you here?" And she said, we've come to learn Arabic. We've come to learn the etiquette of living in a Muslim country. We're doing research on a famous 15th century Sufi philosopher master. And then in passing, she said, and my husband has these dreams of building a city, a Muslim city which is free of the cultural trappings. And some of the cultural trappings are things like slavery, female circumcision, bad stuff. But that's not Islam. That's the culture you live in Africa, in the third world. You don't have a good life as a woman, whatever you do. So he was looking for a place that he could build. This was 1986. They left Jeddah with a check for $21 million. That's when $21 million meant something. I've read your budget. It doesn't mean anything up here. But, so then they looked for a place, and lo and behold, one morning, the 308 residents of Abiquiu woke up to find that a group of Muslims had purchased a 9,000-acre plot, the deed of which was still written on a hide. And they began to build a city. Now, I don't know if the Saudis who bankrolled this knew that it was going to be in the style of a North African village, but it very much is. Let me go through this a bit. I'm not selling National Geographic, but February 2006, Geographic does one page, Muslims in America. I don't know if the laser is going to work. The picture of all the mosques that are on that map, the picture they use is the mosque in Abiquiu. And partly because it's domed, it's vaulted, the ceilings are fabulous. This is what it looks like from the air. The structure on the left is the mosque. That is always open. Mosques are always open. The rest of the building was to be a university, a boarding school for people and children learning Arabic and Islamic studies. It was to be a book printing plant. It was to be a convention center. It was to be a seminary for imams. And if all that happened at one time, it might have worked. They didn't tell them it was hard to earn a living in northern New Mexico. So it didn't quite work all at the same time. So it's still there. It's very underused. They might have 2 seminars a summer, and then they spend a lot of time on maintenance. It is adobe. So these are the interiors. The woodwork, they built a huge structure just for the woodwork. And they worked on it well, I was there when they were still pouring adobe bricks. But the wood and shelving, the interiors are quite beautiful. This is the side. I like this because from this mosque you can see George O'Keeffe's house. Now, she couldn't see them. But I thought that was a good connection that it went back and forth. So Dar al-Islam is still there. The Board of Trustees are in Virginia. I don't know what the next step is, but they have a beautiful webpage. And you're invited to go there. If someone's around, they'll open the building and show you some of the stuff. They bought whole science labs and installed them in Adobe. And I say this lovingly, it's sort of like on my ghost town tour, because there's only a caretaker and hardly anybody there, yet it's well maintained. So you all know this, Santuario de Chimayo, and I think of this as kind of the key, the cornerstone. This was here before everybody else. And this one, late 1800s, before it was finished off. There was always a danger it was going to dissolve. I spend a lot of time at Ghost Ranch, and they like to say, Miss O'Keefe, no one ever called her Georgia. Miss O'Keefe always said that the whole purpose of adobe buildings are to go back to the earth. And yeah, it's like that. So this is an early picture of the Sanctuario. The cross in the center, which looks like the Christ of Escapula, Mexico, Bernardo Abeta was plowing his fields, 1813, and as he plowed, his plow brought up a cross, a huge crucifix. And being an honorable man, he knew it wasn't his. He didn't rush to eBay. He put it on his burro, his horse. He rode all the way to Santa Fe, which was no small thing from Chimayo in the old days. He gave it to the Archdiocese in Santa Fe. He rode home. The next morning, it probably took a couple of days. The next time he started plowing, he dug up the same crucifix. And that crucifix is on the altar and has been there. Now, the sanctuary that there now, it was probably a very small adobe hut because it was private. That whole church was private until the early 50s. And so it was a family chapel, but you could imagine the family, the upkeep they had to take, the visitors they had. So finally, I don't know if they gave it to the Diocese of Santa Fe or they sold it, but then they brought in some people and they really had to stabilize the church. But the cross is still there. My hair was a little bit darker in those days. So the man on the left is Father Roca. And Father Roca was at that church for 54 years. And he used to love to say, several times a day, I came here and they stole my youth. Well, he never went anywhere else. He came directly out of the Spanish Civil War. He was at a seminary. His two brothers were killed because Catholic priests and seminaries were being killed. He was never sure which side did it because there was a lot of confusion, but he came to America and he was the face of Sanctuario for a long time. You all know about the pilgrims. Santa Fe newspapers always put the number around 30,000, 32,000. You can buy a DVD at the gift shop, and it starts by saying this is the largest pilgrimage in North America. I think it could be the largest pilgrimage in the Americas. It's real common to see men, women, carrying crucifixes, dragging crucifixes. And then the line to get in, it's hard to say. There used to be parking here, but then Father Roca said, people come to my church. What do they want? They want a toilet. I have to say, over here. And then they go to the toilet, then they go to the church. So he spent a lot of money, and now there are fabulous restrooms, washrooms, and it takes a long time to get into the church and out of the church. If you've been to the church, this is what's called the miracle room. I don't like that word, but people who believe cures have happened leave mementos of those cures. Many of them are those crutches. Supposedly the cure comes from La Posta, a small hole filled with dirt. People think the miracle is the dirt keeps filling itself. No! People go out in the field. They dig the dirt. The dirt's blessed. And then it's screened, because who wants to pick up a piece of holy dirt and there's a big rock in it? So they screen the dirt and they put it in the hole, and people take it home. And I've seen the most heart-touching things. I've seen people who are sitting in the hole. I mean, they're sitting, their feet are in the hole. People who are both hands are pressed down in the hole. And being that I'm on internet a little bit, I've gotten requests for this dirt. I've sent this dirt to India. I think, well, I'll let the university pay for that postage, but I'll send it to them. Santa Nino de Atocha, that's like another story. I'll do this one. Herman Rednick, raised in Philadelphia, nice Jewish boy, came out west, became a prophet. I can't define prophet. I'll define it. He all of a sudden, there's a group of followers around him who listened to him, who read his writings, who talked to him, had meetings on Sundays. And Herman Rednick was teaching a kind of philosophy. his center is still, well, it's right below the, if Lama's 19 miles, and Herman Rednick's site is in El Rito, and that's like a little bit beyond Cuesta. So he had a house, and before long people started to build houses around him, and it became the Lorien Commune, which is very hard. The Taos Library has one book that somebody must have done a master's thesis on, the Lorien Commune, and they have a picture of Herman. Herman was doing drawings. He has so many drawings. And in retrospect, and looking back, the drawings don't look like his Jewish, and then he became a Christian. Everybody has to be several religions before they become a great teacher or a prophet. So he had paintings like this. And later on, people said, well, that's more Eastern, that's more Tibetan, that's more Asian. And, you know, he's got hundreds of paintings, and they kind of look like this. So he dies, and all of a sudden, Lama Dorji, who has the big Tibetan stupa on Airport Road in Santa Fe, Lama Dorji hears about that there's a commune, and he wants to go visit it. So he goes to visit it, and he meets the people, and he's looking at Herman's work, and he's talking to the people, and he says to them, Herman's been preparing you to be Tibetan Buddhist. They go, nah. A year later, they're building a Tibetan temple, and he's giving instructions. And they find that the stuff that Lama Dorji, who is still living at the stupa in Santa Fe, is following right in the lead of Herman Rednick. So there's a Tibetan stupa in Cuesta. Now this is the one on Airport Road. I mean, this one has an interior. A stupa is a reliquary. So as it's being built, they keep adding things like parts of the robes of high lamas, begging bowls, crystals. And I'm afraid we live in precarious times, so maybe a book of the list of donors. Why not be with the Buddha's robes? So things go inside, and they're the relics, and out of that come services, meditation services. So this is the inside of that stupa. Lama Dorji is still there, and I saw him one day, and he sits outside a lot. And I said, Lama, I've been in the stupa. My understanding is that there are to be 1,008 Buddhas in the stupa. I don't see that. And he goes, when the painters come, they paint Buddhas in the eyes of the other Buddhas. Humbled. I was humbled. He wasn't. So this is the stupa that they built on Herman Rednick's property. And this is in Cuesta. It has a small opening, but the center, where it looks like a bowl, that's the last thing completed, and an opening is kept in it. And that's where that's where the relics are placed. So that even if there's nobody around, as a reliquary, it's emitting. I don't know what to call it. See, the Buddhists don't have a sense of, they have a sense of presence. If you're in the presence of a teacher, that's darshan. In the presence of relics, it raises your consciousness. That's probably all you have to do. So Lama Dorji, I talked to him. I said, Lama, where were you born? Thinking that he was probably born in North India or Sikkim. He said, Berkeley. Many Tibetans were, it's a long history, but the United States granted immigration status to a large number of Tibetans in a perilous time in Tibet's history. Lonely Planet says that the Chinese invasion of Tibet has killed 1.8 million Tibetans. That's through being forced off the land, a whole bunch of things. So a number were allowed to come to the United States. So I said, and how did you come to New Mexico? Remember, part of this is, how did you get here? So he said, his teacher told him to go to New York and start a center. So he said he was driving to New York with two devotees, two followers, two young American Buddhists. And as they came closer, I guess they're coming down I-40, and they see that they're in Albuquerque, and the one guy said, I've always wanted to see Santa Fe. So Lama's fine. You know, he's got his whole life to build the Dharma. So they travel to Santa Fe, and as they're driving, Lama's in the front seat, and he starts crying. Not huge back-wrenching cries, sobs, cries, tears, and the two men are very worried. Lama, are you all right? He goes, oh, this is so beautiful. This is like Tibet. And they said, we didn't know you were in Tibet. And he said, I was never in Tibet, but this is like Tibet. He said, I'm not going to New York. I'm staying here. A lot of people do that. They come here and they go, no, I feel the vibe. I'm staying here. So, this is quick. This is a Zen center in Taos. It's called Rising Phoenix Center. I happen to get there on the day. Of course, it's Taos. This is the interior. Zen people are uncluttered. Don't even bring a handkerchief or a sock with you. It's like, it's too much. This is Koben Shino and his daughter Coco. I was lucky enough to have her as a student one time, so we got to know Koben really well. And this is one of their weekend-long session meditations. This was founded by a guy who was in early Lama, almost the beginning, and he didn't like that vibe. I'll start my own temple. And he did, and that's still in operation. Yogi Bhajan, Sat Nam Sir. Yogi Bhajan comes to America as a master yogi. Now, he's amazing. I was lucky enough to have lunch with him maybe 4 or 5 times. Each time, something phenomenal happened. But this goes to a story. This is Yogi Bhajan with his early years. Dark, ferocious beard. The breathing of a huge machine generating energy. Now, I can't be sure this is the photograph, but do you all remember Bruce King? Okay. So, every August there's a celebration for a yogi's birthday, and it happens at the Gurdwara. You are all invited to the Gurdwara. You have to wear a hat, but if you don't have a hat, there's hats in the entranceways. You are always welcome. But the birthday party happened, and one time I was there were 1 present governor and 2 former governors. Yogi was very political. He believed that if you weren't in politics and you're complaining about your town, well, you're foolish, stupid, do something. So Bruce King got on stage and he was twanging. Yogi, you remember when we met? Yogi nodded, because he's sitting in the front, he's on a dais, he's nodding. And Bruce said, it was early one Saturday morning, and Alice and I was a young whippersnapper. I was running for state office up here in Santa Fe. And Alice and I would go out and we'd have our brochures and we'd have pamphlets, and the favorite thing, Bruce, boy, when he shook your hand, he remembered your name. He just knew your name. So they're driving down the road. Bruce says to Alice, Alice, I think we just passed a field of naked people. And Bruce said, Alice looked at him and said, do you think they're registered? And they pulled over. Now, it could be this photograph. I mean, it's something like that, because in 67 to early 70s, hippies were coming in their buses. They were in the big meadows over Santa Fe. He was teaching them yoga. So, powerful picture, powerful man. There are probably 500 Sikhs in Espanola. You might think there's 5,000. It could be one person running all around. It's not. There's 500. So I talked to the secretary one time. Sikhs take the last name Khalsa. So I said to the secretary, I happened to be there when the FedEx truck came. Thank you. Thank you. So the guy runs in, runs out. So I go in to see the secretary. I said, tell me. So the FedEx guy comes and he says, it's for Kir Khalsa. What do you do? He said, well, the FedEx guys know. They have to come here. And then we try to trace it backwards. Where's it coming from? Is it goat supplies? Oh, that's the Khalsa over there. So it's like that. The Gurdwara, the temple, which is right next to the movie theater in Espanola, is, what's the movie theater? Pasatiempo? That's the old movie theater. Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher. So I'm looking at the dome and I said, Yogi, because the big dome, I'll show you the big dome. Remember this dome? This is the Sikh Center in Amritsar. I took my 2 sons there about 20 years ago. I'm not sure they've ever forgiven me. India is a shock, you know, and they were, I know that behind my back they were talking, saying what a wonderful trip they had, and it was amazing, and it was a, you know, it was a great adventure, but it's hard. But, so I said, Yogi, where did you get, who built the Golden Dome? And he said, we went to Espanola. We got Body and Fenderman. They built it for us easy. So, this is an amazing place. I mean, but the lecture is not on this, but it is in the middle of a bathing pond. So in the Gurdwara is this magnificent mural, which I have listened to an hour lecture on the mural. So I will only say that as they were settling into this little compound, in came a man, Edward O'Brien, who fell in love with the Sikhs, and he painted this magnificent mural. And if you were to look at it and you knew about the Sikhs, you'd know almost everything about, now the Sikhs are only about 600 years old, so we know everything about them, we know their history. It's all on that board. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So, how did the Sikhs get to Espanola? How did Espanola become the capital of Sikhs in North America? So, I don't know if you're going to remember this, but the restaurant Pasquale's in Santa Fe used to be a restaurant called the Golden Temple, and it was Sikh operated. And of course, the Sikhs are ferociously vegetarian, and so you could go in and get a delightful, naughty, young, immature bottle of sparkling grape juice. The meals were fabulous. They work hard on cooking, but they were having a hard time. It was like the early 70s. They were being harassed, insulted. So there were 3 guys who were operating it, and they called Yogi, who was living in Los Angeles, and they said, we want to come home. We don't want to be here. This is the frontier. We don't want to be here. So Yogi said to them, before you leave, what is the weather like? And they said, it's funny, it's gray, it's rainy, it's different. He said, before you leave, just drive around. And they said, why? He said, just drive around. So I've seen this in print. So it's not just hearsay. So they drive around. They go a little bit toward Pecos. They go maybe out toward Galisteo. They drive around. They're driving toward Espanola, and like in a Charlton Heston movie, the clouds part, and a huge sunbeam comes down. I'm not kidding. They turn over the hill, which is the movie theater. The sunbeam is illuminating a house that says for rent. They never left. They never left. They got bigger. Okay. I will only say that Yogi has a phone over there with 20 speed dials. While I'm trying to take his picture, I'm also trying to read the speed dials. Governors, everyone loved him. Everybody loved him. I was there when Gary Johnson was doing honoring Yogi, and he said, I mean, I wish I had his whole speech. He said, the debt that New Mexico owns to the Sikhs is monumental. They're the largest teachers of yoga. They're the largest drug rehab places. They don't want the government money. They do it on their own. They're politically sensitive. They do the neighborhoods good. He just couldn't stop talking about the debt that New Mexico owes the Sikh is monumental. And so what happened? I can't belabor this, but when Yogi died, he did not declare an heir. And so the empire, New Mexico business at one time, Akal Security, which was doing security for federal prisons, federal offices, post offices, state fair, airport, was billing over $1 billion a year 20 years ago. And that's all pretty much crumbled. And now there are lawsuits against other Sikhs, and the story will probably go on for 25 years. I'm betting. But It's online, but I throw in Ghost Ranch only because I spend a lot of time there. People go there. They have what amounts to a spiritual experience, and I like it. Okay, Iris Kelts does Scrapbook of Taoist Hippies. I think that this is Iris Kelts when she's 13. She's much older now, but she's around Albuquerque and she's involved in a lot of things. And she tells stories about being out there. Easy Rider gets filmed in, part of it is the New Buffalo commune, the north end of Taos. People see it and they say, well, I want to live in a commune. I want to live with Peter Fonda. And a generation starts. New Buffalo was not a spiritual commune. It was a social commune. It was the living together. It was planting. It lasted for a while. I mean, at one time, John Nichols said there were 31 communes in the northern New Mexico mountains. There's 2 now. Long term. So there's that. There's the boys. Huerfano, Roberta Peters, smart. She did it a smart way. She was going to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She got a grant to live as a hippie for 2 years. Somebody paid her. It was great. So she wrote 2 books. One is about the culture of northern New Mexico. The teachers who came here, the yogis, the swamis, they were all coming to this one little tight area of northern New Mexico. And as near as I can tell, in a better picture, you might see her hip, and that's marijuana she's holding when it was illegal. Oh, it's still illegal. The last I saw of Roberta Price, she became an attorney and she specializes in intellectual properties. And then she wrote a second book, A Chronicle of the Counterculture. I have had several private moments with Native Americans and sweat lodges and stuff, but I think that's private. So when I lecture, if I had more time, I would tell you things about Native Americans, but I always underline by saying, everything I learned from Tony Hillerman. I don't want to. The center of northern New Mexico, Neem Karoli Baba, a Hindu holy man from the 60s. Americans found him in India, North India. He had 4 or 5 little ashrams in North India. And the story comes down to a Jewish professor, a guru, a monkey, a book, a temple. So Americans went to India, and I believe they were hoping to find a teacher who was 6'4", painfully thin, white robes, long white hair, feet never touched the ground, the robes never got muddy. They found Neem Karoli Baba, obese, toothless, bald, naked under his blanket. They loved him. They still love him. There are still pilgrimages. And his story is a fabulous story too. But there's a temple in Taos. So the man on the left is Timothy Leary. The man on the right is Richard Alpert. They're both professors at Harvard. At that time, it was legal to have Sandow's medical company of Morristown, New Jersey, make you LSD. So they claimed they were experimenting. I believe them. The administration at Harvard thought that they were just having parties with graduate students. So the way Richard Alpert tells it, he woke up one Sunday morning and saw on the front page of the New York Times that he and Leary were fired. He didn't care. He was looking for something else. So remember the picture on the right. Here he is on the left. He goes to India. He finds this man. He finds Neem Karoli Baba. He's so intoxicated with him. He stays. He's silent for a year. He's fasting. He runs. The stories are amazing. This is not Richard Alpert, but when Neem would sit on a bench, people would crawl under the bottom just to touch his feet. Now, I was late going to India, and I say this lovingly. I was on an airplane. The bastard died. So I never got to see him in person. But there's at least 2 books just about that he would appear to people after his death. Okay, so Richard Alpert, who's now Baba Ramdas, writes this book. Remember, be here now. This is not a holy man. I guess in a certain capitalist economy, he's a holy man. This is from Jacob's book. Steve Jobs goes to India and he sends Mark Zuckerberg too. Now they all go to a great place, Rishikesh. The Ganges is clean, the food is great, the people are nice, there's a lot of ashrams around. But he went to India. He read the book and he went to India. He's comments about it many other times. So here's Ram Dass. He gives lectures all the time. Ram Dass crawls into this blue school bus. He comes out every day. But he writes the book, Be Here Now. Now, I've been in graduate school forever. And when I started, I bought the 5-volume history of Indian philosophy. It weighed 9 pounds. It was in 5 volumes. I could barely understand it. Be Here Now, over 2 million publications. And that was the last time I looked at Wikipedia. That was the book that turned a whole generation on to spirituality, not just Hindu spirituality. So Ram Dass has a statue made, and the statue is put in Taos. I once took my sister here, and she said, why are the bananas on the altar? And I said, Mary, what would you give a monkey? Okay. Come on. Is there anyone out there? So, but the main person that people have come to this temple is Neem Karoli Baba. This is the temple where the double doors are. Used to be, for want of a better word, a chicken coop. It still had chicken wire when I saw it in 1981. And it's been cleaned and polished, and then they too needed toilets. And then they needed a kitchen. Then they needed a dorm on the 2nd floor. And now they're building a whole new, this is 2 pictures. So they're building a mandara, which will be the place for the statue. And there'll be a walkway from the old temple to the new one. And on a big festival in September, which is the anniversary of Neem Karoli Baba, if you're worried about getting old, go to India. No one dies. They just leave their body. So he leaves his body in September 1973. And on that festival, they get 900 people. And most are Americans who follow the Hindu path, but they get Hindus from Denver, Amarillo, Phoenix, a number of places. Okay. Penitentes, you may have seen these crosses on the hill. This is actually on the way if you were going to Sanctuario de Chimayo. This is an older version, archaic. The penitentes are alive and well in northern New Mexico, although the numbers have shrunk. Once upon a time, there were 164 moradas. Moradas are not churches. They're a place of meeting. But there were 164 that they could calculate. Now there's probably less than 50. It's hard to be a penitente these days because you take a solemn promise that you will be back every Good Friday. It doesn't matter where you are. You will be back. So that's hard. Plus, in the morada, only Spanish is spoken, and you have to be Roman Catholic. That's one. So Charles Loomis, who wrote that book, Poco Loco, friend of Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, an advocate for Native American. I mean, he saved a lot of Native American lands. Well, he was a photographer, and he sort of wheedled his way into a small village in northern New Mexico with cigars for the men, candy for the children, cloth and needles for the women. And he would take pictures, ordinary pictures, women cooking, men chopping wood. And they were to have a Good Friday pilgrimage, and the elders told him he was welcome, but he couldn't bring his camera. So he came with his camera. And the elders, he had so wheedled himself in, they felt hard to not say you couldn't do something. So they said, well, yeah, put your camera way over there. Well, before long, he's right at places. So he does a series of pictures like this. This is pre-1889. He has a series of pictures like this. He's real excited. He writes a little copy and he sends them to book publishers and magazines in New York City. They think he's nuts. They have no idea where these pictures are coming from. Finally, the magazine Cosmopolitan picked it up and they ran a story in 1889. Martha Weigel in her book said no one ever died on the cross. I'm not sure that's true. But Martha Weigel was a great editor, researcher. So these pictures started to go around. So the initial meeting with the penitentes, they're a savage bunch and they kill one of their own and they flagellate and they Hey, this is a 16-week lecture. You're getting a quick. So, and they follow in the tradition of the crucified Christ. All penitente activity ends on Good Friday night. You would think that on Easter Sunday they'd be doing something special. They go to the little country church. Then they go home and have lunch. Their thing finishes with Good Friday, with the Passion of Jesus. Jesus was scourged. So here's one. Craig Vajarian. I saw him give this lecture. I saw him give it twice. I'm watching my clock. So he's a new kid from the East Coast. So he's Armenian. We accept everybody. He's a photographer. He's carrying a 8x10 box camera. Why so big? Ansel Adams had an 8x10 box camera. He's driving around. He doesn't even know he's on private ground. So he sees this building. He just thinks, well, this is a really interesting old building. Now, he doesn't cross the chain. He sets up his box camera on the road, dirt road. I know exactly where he was standing. And he's playing around. He's looking at this old building with the crucifixes. And his head's under the cover, you know, like you see Ansel Adams. And he hears the dirt and soil shuffling and takes his hood off. And at that very moment, a man smashed him in the face. He punched him in the face. There were 3 men. The other guy grabs his camera by the tripod and is smashing it on the ground. And the other guy's kicking him in the small of his back. And they say, don't ever come back. And he's rubbing his wounds. And supposedly he said to himself, there's a story here. Well, after time, and he doesn't explain, but after a long time, he becomes friends with the penitentes, and they allow him to do a book. So this book, The Divine Light, in the Divina Luz, is the story of some of the old moradas, some of the new ones. He doesn't photograph inside, but he does this book. And here's the old building. This is called the Georgia O'Keeffe Morada because when the corner wall fell in, Georgia, who was frugal, said, I'll buy the materials, but I won't pay for labor. So, and it's in Abiquiu. In fact, if you look to the left of the old building, there's the mosque on that mesa. It's hard to see, but I mean, there's the mosque on the mesa. Okay, and this is another morada that simply has gone back to the dirt. This young man, who has passed away, is a penitente, Felipe Ortega, and he found me. He said, I've been watching you. I got a little nervous. He said, I see you're with students. I see you're careful. I think you're culturally sensitive. I'd like to bring you to our morada. Amazing. I mean, like, we're just white kids from Pennsylvania. So he takes us to his morada. He's also a potter. He's quite famous in northern New Mexico. So this is the inside of his morada. A morada is not a church. If a priest wanted to be a member, wanted to be a penitente, he would be one of equals. I mean, the priest doesn't come here and say Mass. They don't say Mass. They say the rosary. They have many private moments, and I got real close to him, but I never got to the private moments. So this is in his morada. This is a pilgrimage. Every morada has some place where there's a cross, and on Good Friday you make a pilgrimage to the cross. Doesn't matter how far away it is, how close it is. You're making a trip to Calvary. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet about penitentes. I mean, there's even, I've even seen lectures about penitentes. The idea is that if the old guys are dying off, we have to attract newer people. And the guy I just showed you, Felipe Ortega, he was excommunicated from his own morada because he dared to translate the Spanish Alabado hymns into English. Not everybody's comfortable with change. So, crypto Jews in New Mexico. I do some lectures for Rhodes Scholars on crypto Jews. The short story is that on March 31st, 1492, by edict, the Jews, the Moors, the freethinkers, everybody except Roman Catholics are expelled from Spain. There used to be a reward on the internet, $1 million reward proving Columbus was a Jew. And actually, the clues are not in his life, they're in his will. Now, if you beat me to $1 million, I want 10%. There's a number of things in his will that are very Jewish, and he's always been accused of that. So, crypto-Jews, they fled to the New World. First they fled to the Spanish islands. They didn't flee to Mexico because Mexico wasn't really developed. But they feared the Inquisition. The Inquisition came to the New World, came to Santa Fe. So now, the Jews were expelled 1492. The last public burning of Jews in Mexico City was 1695, 200 years later. They'd kept their identity for 200 years, if that's all they did. But then, and this is another one, this is a torture where they lock your feet in a vise and they put a fire under your feet. It's unbelievable, the cruelty that the Inquisition visited on. Once you were accused, you were in jail. I mean, you almost never got out of jail. The conditions were so bad. But the short story is that as settlers from Mexico, Zacatecas and stuff, were coming up to the New World, and the Mexicans in Spanish kept fabulous records. They recorded everything. If you had 3 dogs, the dogs' names are in your brief. They find that many of the people who came north were wanted by the Inquisition for questioning. So Stanley Hortus writes a book, To the End of the Earth. They came this far to escape Mexico, Inquisition, to be somewhat more free. They still had to hide. The Edict of Expulsion was not lifted until 1984. By that time, there were synagogues back in Spain, but it was never rescinded, 1984. Okay. You see this fabulous picture. In the middle is a little bump. I'm afraid to touch the button for the laser. But anyway, I don't know if you've been there. That little bump. That's the Monastery of Christ in the Desert. And it's along the Chama River. It is 18 miles from Ghost Ranch, and then 16 miles down a dirt road. The dirt road used to be death on a rainy day. You could start in, you'd never get out. How did this get here? So, Prior Alaret. Now, the Benedictines that own this and practice here, they have many monasteries around the world. And it turns out that this monastery, they have a lot of money. They have donors. The last time I was there were 52 monks. They didn't even have room for them yet. They're building a module. They build a concrete pad, then they bring in a little house. And then 2 monks live in this little casita. But Prior Alared was looking for a new place for a monastery, and he was looking in Mexico, because they have 2 in Mexico now. They have 2 in Vietnam. And he couldn't find a place, so he came to visit friends in Santa Fe. The first morning he's here, he's reading the Santa Fe newspaper, and I have a copy somewhere. I have a photo. There's a 4x4-inch ad says, cattle ranch for sale. Inhospitable, long dirt road, difficult terrain, difficult water, away from people, rugged, isolated. Alred goes, I want to see that. So the people he's staying with, they figured something out. He goes out and he goes, I'll take it. So he by accident or design, he comes here. This is the building they built. A great architect built it. And what's extraordinary is that their first mass is like 6:15 and it's dark. So it's not called mass anymore, it's called Eucharistic service. So Eucharistic service starts, and it's getting lighter. And before long, there's these magnificent cliffs rising up behind the church that you can see it. And the altar is made of stone, it's made of flagstone. Pretty amazing. This is the interior. And through those windows are the solid cliffs that you would see as the day goes on. So I showed this as a picture of the building, but this is a surprise picture. So perhaps 20 years ago, I said to my 2 sons, Toby and Elon, I said, and I've done this many times since, they have a retreat house. They have 12 rooms. You have to stay 2 nights. You do not have to follow the order. You don't have to do a retreat. They don't have a retreat. You do your own thing. You can follow them. You can talk to the monks. They ask you to do a little bit of work in the morning, a little tiny bit. So I said to my sons, I'm going to Christ in the Desert, which they had been to a couple times, because all the places I showed you here, I said to them at one time, you know, you guys are breaking my heart. I've been teaching 30, 40 years, and you've never taken one of my classes. And they said, yeah, but we went to every one of those places. We don't have to take your class. Okay. So I said to them, I'm going to Christ in the Desert for 2 nights. You want to come? They said, yeah. So I was more surprised than they were. But it was December, and I think my son on the right, Elon, I think it could have been his first semester of college or something, but I'm showing the building. Of course, precarious, dirt, road, mud, treachery, deceit, dishonesty. Next day it snowed. That night it snowed. I thought, oh my God, we're going to be here till Valentine's Day. But no, we actually got out. That part was good. And they make beer. They make a lot of beer. In fact, what they've done now, there's a lot of quotes on this paper carton. You know, and it's talking about wisdom and peace and rest and tranquility and contemplation and a good drink. So I think they make 7 different kinds of beers, and Monk's Ale is one. But what I like now, most of their beer comes in a paper, you know, like this, a 6-pack, but it's got a real picture of a real monk on it. And most of the guys I've known for, 25 years. So here's Brother Rodrigo, his brother Christian. I feel bad taking them home in a beer container, but they do that. I throw in a couple at the end. This is a sacred site. Before it became Bodhi's, it was Gonzales Mercantile, and it was on top of the hill across from Bodhi's. And Karl Bodhi, coming from Austria, and in his pictures, he too has a heavy wool suit buttoned right to the top button. He starts as a clerk. Before long, it's Gonzales and Bodhi. And then Gonzales is purchased out, and then there's Bodhi, and that was on top. It's hard to believe, but the main road did not run by Bodhi's gas station. It went over the hill. And the whole city was built on the hill to prevent Indian attack, and it just stayed that way. So when the state moved the road down, Bodhi moved General Store down. And Karl Bodhi still lives, not the father, the son, still lives in Abiquiu, and you see him once in a while. And I talk to him when I do. Oh, he knows so much gossip, you have no idea. Town of 300, he knows everything. But he sells it to Dennis Liddy, and Dennis Liddy takes it from a 2-pump gas station into a place where you get the New York Times every day, you get asparagus, you get different kinds of mustard. And they have a YouTube showing how they make their green chili cheeseburger. And he's on the trail of green chili cheeseburgers. There's 20 spots in New Mexico, which are supposedly... The winner of the state fair this year, green chili contest, is way out in Clayton. I will make a pilgrimage trip. I will report back to you. So, Bodhi's the one. Now I'm not done. I still have 3 minutes. So I was going to do a little bit longer story. You may not know this guy. This is Ra Paulette, who is the cave digger of Embudo. There's a documentary on him. You can find him on YouTube. His documentary was shown at the Guild Theater in Albuquerque. They did 2 shows, 2 days, completely sold out. Ra Paulette digs caves. Now, I didn't put him in here because he's an architect. No, wait, this is a little example. These are my students. So we're in his cave, but he goes into sandstone, and he carves it out. And he doesn't want it to be public, so he carries a lot of the sand away with him in a sack on his back, which he distributes along the creek in places. But he's digging because he wants a place where people can go, especially as a group. The healing nature of Mother Earth. The last time I saw him, and I felt really bad, he was building it was to be his last cave. He's strong, he's tough, he carries stuff. But he's not going to be able to do it forever. He cannot hire young men to do it. He offers them $15 an hour just to be his apprentices. And they go, no, I don't want to do that. So he does it by himself. He was building a cave that I saw the beginning of that would have a 50-foot dome inside a building. And he believed that he would bring veterans of wars back into there for healing, for post-traumatic. And he would build, now if someone said, will you build me a cave on my property? He would, because he didn't have a job. He had a wife, thank God. And she had like an ordinary, not an ordinary, there's no ordinary job. She had a regular job. So she kept the whole thing alive. And then some people would give him money, but he had done about 17 caves. And then I talked to him one day and I said, is the big dome cave done? He said, no, I quit. He said, I came back one morning and part of the roof fell in. And I thought that was a sign. I mean, 17 domes, he's had a little bit of water damage, things like that, but he's never had one caved in. He said, I can't even think of finishing it and maybe a part of the wall would fall out. So I have one more small thing. D.H. Lawrence. Now, I think this is the milieu, the atmosphere. We just talked about this before. This is on the Lawrence Ranch, which is north of Taos. It was donated to the University of New Mexico a long time ago. Never trust the Board of Trustees. They wanted to sell it. And people are screaming, no, it's 190 acres up in Taos. But there used to be a big sign said, Lawrence Shrine. Shrine. And I go there one day and the sign's been changed to Lawrence Memorial. And I thought, oh, the Board of Trustees. What? So they named it the Shrine because that's the millennium, that's the milieu that it sort of worked in. And inside is supposedly a concrete box, and supposedly his ashes are inside. But the story that the caretaker told me was that Frida, his wife, there were rumors that people were going to come and steal his ashes. He had been exhumed in Marseille, brought to the United States, and there were these stories. People were going to come and steal his ashes. They tried to steal Abraham Lincoln's body. You should see how they fixed that. Frida supposedly grabbed the urn while the concrete was being mixed and went, let him steal him now. Like that. Okay, I'm done. This is a hermitage at Lama Foundation. There are very few places where you can go and have a hermitage. This is on top of a mountain. It's a small building. I spent a couple of days there in early May. They have a way of, you come down in the morning and there's a big iron case. You put a list in there. You want candles, you want chocolate, you want more chocolate. Candles, you want more chocolate. And they come back in the afternoon and they fill up your box and you can stay for a couple of days. The longest you can stay is 14 days, but no one's ever stayed 14 days. That's pretty long. But inside, 60 seconds. Inside, there are journals. So the people who stay there, they write. Some write very little things, some write really big things. So I'm in there, and even when I'm not on pilgrimage, if I know that it's empty, I'll ask permission to go and sit there, and I read the journals. So while I was there, I'm looking through the journal, and a young lady had written, 14-day retreat, 28 cans, Nutri-Slim, not a good idea. Oh no, there's 100. I'm going to give you one more. So I'm reading another one. It said, I drove 1,800 miles here to be with God, and all I could think about is that fly that will never leave the hermitage. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and take some questions. Seeing hands, but not going up.
So, what is it about New Mexico that draws these kind of people?
Oh my God. See, what I like to do, if I have a class and I get them for a couple of weeks before and I get them for 2 weeks on the road and I get them for a couple of weeks after, I keep playing with that. It's like, I'll say out loud, how did they all come here? I was going to have a little newspaper tripod, something to draw on. All these places are within like 60, 70 miles. They're right there in the middle. Because I may not see you again until next year. My strongest feeling is that there is such a respect for the land from Native Americans, and there's such a long history, first of the Catholic Church, and then the Protestants came in 1890, and they started a revolution because they handed out Bibles. You could read the Bible. Before that, as a Catholic, you weren't supposed to read the Bible. It would confuse you. So I take the long traditions, and in fact, at the Lama Foundation, when they started, I'm not kidding, I mean, they're all psychology majors. Who would go live under a tent in the middle of the winter? The Taos Pueblo Indians came, showed them how to make adobe bricks, showed them how to lay the adobe bricks, showed them how to get firewood. They took really good care of them. And for that reason, there's several weekends that Lama has, they host. They feed them, they take care of them, they bring the firewood. They don't try to become Native Americans themselves, but there's a long tradition that the natives had helped them. Now, the woman, the wife, Barbara Durkee, who founded Lama Foundation, I said to her, Barbara, why here? She said, we were 2,000 miles away from our parents, and there's no building codes. Now, I don't know if that's enough reason to start the whole community, but it was, I was once lecturing at Ghost Ranch, and there was like, it wasn't a seminar or anything, but for some reason there were a lot of Los Alamos people at Ghost Ranch, and I'm kind of giving a lecture about the spirit. And a scientist raised his hand, and he said, is it possible that the San Juan Basin is a great receiving dish for strange messages from other planets? And I said, I'm going to write that down. I don't know, honestly, I don't, the people that came together, they didn't know each other really. I mean, after a while, the Sikhs would visit Lama, and they would go to the mosque, because the mosque had, I mean, at one time there were about 400 men working on the mosque. So the mosque was designed by an Egyptian architect named Hassan Fahi, who's he's written books, and his books written about him, using the material. So when he said to Stephen, whose Islamic name was El Nuruddin, he said, this is what I want, but you don't have bricklayers here. I need to bring 12 Nubian bricklayers. Now, the American Muslims are weird enough, but now we bring the Nubians. The Nubians won't come without their wives. The wives won't come without their children. The wives won't come without their cooks. So before long, there's a whole community, 50 Nubians. And they would quote homeschool, but sometimes the money wasn't coming as fast as it should, so they take the 50 kids and they put them in the Abiquiu Elementary School. But the principal was smart enough to hire all the mothers to be assistants. Brilliant. And then when the money came, they thanked the principal, and they went back to what they were doing. But they didn't know each other. I've played around with miles. It's so few miles between these places. And now I don't count, the Sikhs are a little bit south in Espanola, but I mean, I don't count Santa Fe. I mean, there's a lot of things in Santa Fe. There's 7 Tibetan stupas. They didn't know each other. They were building. So I have to go on Native American and love of the land. And this was a very isolated part of the world. I mean, there's still Spanish words that are Castilian. They're not American Spanish. So.
Is there a book, either by you or anybody, or a compilation of this presentation, more or less, with the pictures? And you say it's all within, what, 60 miles?
Yeah, 60, 70 miles.
What a map. Do you know anything that's put together like that?
Every morning I wake up, I roll out of bed, I get on my knees, And I thank God that I have no drive to write a book. I have a lot of free time, and people will constantly say to me, oh, if I only had part of the free time. Now, when I say free time, I'm the busiest guy I know. But I mean, I have free time. I don't have a real job. I haven't had a job for 20 years, which is another lecture. I call it survival. But I don't think there is a book. I mean, I can...
You still have classes?
I taught last spring, but I haven't taught this year. I don't know if I resigned or was fired. What? I taught in a very small program where everybody knew everybody else and everybody was happy. And then they changed it from a program to a college. And it got very formal. And the men started wearing sport coats and talking about tenure. And I thought, nah, I've been here long enough. I don't need that. I might be able to send you. Now, every one of these places has a website. I mean, I could send you a list of websites so that if you forwarded, all you'd have to do is click on it. You could find out where the website is. And except for, well, let me take it back. Penitente moradas. The rule is every morada is open on Good Friday. Some are more open than others, but everyone is open. And in fact, there was a move, I don't know, trying to. People still think they're killing their young, they're crucifying people, they're flagellating blood, they're doing stuff, and I will say they do private stuff that I don't know about, but they're open to visitors. They'll explain, they'll invite you back. The big ceremony is like at midnight on Good Friday, and it's extraordinary. I mean, the ceremony is supposed to, in some way, echo Christ dying on the cross. The skies turn black, lightning comes, the veil is rented from the temple. So the penitentes are fabulous. They build chaos, darkness, anxiety. People call out the name of dead people, of relatives, and they hear them talk back. It's very powerful. And honestly, you're invited. You don't have to find them, but they're... No, okay.
Have you ever had any spiritual experience that you weren't expecting as you walked on any of the land?
I have.
Okay.
Oh, wait. So I don't know if you read Taos newspaper, but Larry Torres, he has a column in a Taos newspaper every week. And he's a folklorist, historian, and stuff like that. So I go to a lecture by him. It was on Mabel Dodge Lujan, and he's going through. And he just says as an aside, and when I was working in a restaurant in college, I had 4 wonderful conversations with Miss O'Keefe after her breakfast. Then he goes on to something else. And in the question and answer period, someone raises their hand. They said, Dr. Torres, where could I find those 4 conversations you had with George O'Keefe? And he said, not everything's for sale. Not everything is product. I didn't write those down. And so with great love in my heart, I have to tell you, I can't say. I mean, I think. I'm going to tell one last story, and then we're done. Okay. Oh, I got a microphone. I forgot. One of the characters here, Yogi Bhajan. Whoop. Okay. One of the characters, Yogi Bhajan, was so powerful. I have many stories. They're not infinite, but so I always have a teaching assistant, and I always pick him or her up around 5 o'clock in the morning because everybody's excited. We're going up north. We're going to go camping. We're not with our parents. We're going to build fires at night. We're going to have sweat lodges. We're going to eat fabulous foods, vegetarian foods. So I pull down the street where Catherine is, and she's waiting out in front of her house, and she has a little duffel bag, and she's a photographer. She has a big camera bag. And I pull up and I jump out, and I'm putting her stuff in the coach, and she's very quiet. So she jumps in, she closes the door, and we're driving, and I'm like, Catherine, are you okay? Yes. Okay, drive. So we come to the first stop sign, but I see the stop sign coming, so I pull over and I park at the curb. And I turn to my seat and say, Catherine, We're taking 15 students out in the wilderness, the frontier. I have to know you're all right. Their parents want them to come home. Or they will after a couple days. They'll want them to come home. She puts her head on her knees and she starts crying. She just absolutely, oh my God. This is one of those where your back is vibrating, crying. So being a gentleman, I wait silently, and then she sits up and she goes, my husband hates me. He told me he hates me. Now, she's like 22 years old. My husband hates me. He doesn't like me. He's happy to see me go. He said he may not be here when I get back. When we have dinner, I try to have dinner together. He brings a book. I bring a book. We read the stuff. We go back and forth. And then she goes, okay. She said, that's not new stuff. I'm just telling you what happened. Okay. So we go. And so for 3 days we're doing stuff. And on the fourth day we pull into the ashram, the Gurdwara, right there in Espanola. The yogi loves to talk. He has an outdoor lunch dinner area that seats maybe 24 people at a single table. All the chairs have fabric rugs from Philip Sarit on the cushions. He's got a swimming pool. It looks a bit like the Hearst Mansion. It's not that big, but it has Greek statues. Yogi's also a collector of art. So I'm sitting at his right hand. I'm not the heir apparent, but I'm sitting at his right hand. There's a young man, and then the next person is Catherine. So we're talking, and he would send over to Matilda's, and he would get 24 calsa burritos. They know him. He's a good guy. They're not going to use lard in his burritos. So we're talking. All of a sudden, he looks across the young man, and he looks at Catherine. And he says, "And what's your name?" And she says, "Catherine, Yogi." There's a little tiny pause, and he said, "Catherine, are you married?" And she said, "Yes, Yogi." And he said, "Catherine, are you happily married?" And she says, "Yes, Yogi." And I mean, I'm thinking to myself, this sword is really going deep. And he said, "Catherine, you'll be married a long time?" And she said, "Yes, Yogi." And then he goes like this, "Never lie to a yogi." and he beckons with his hand. I stand up. I grab the young man next to me, who of course is young and thick. I grab him by the shoulders. We disappear. Catherine sits next to him for about 20 minutes. They just talk. So, I didn't want to know anything that happened. And the only thing I said was, "Catherine, you slip Yogi a note before lunch?" No. I mean, oh no, there's other things like that. I mean, he would look into someone and he would have an idea of what they were thinking. But I mean, that was part of his gift. But Catherine did eventually get divorced, which, I don't know, better, worse, whatever. And I talk to her once in a while or on email, and we come back to that having lunch. And the yogi is saying, it is not good to lie to a yogi. Thank you. Go home. It's raining.